is December the 12th. It's a Friday, and I am reading Travels with My Aunt. This is a novel by Greene, published in 1969, and it is, I think, one of his most amusing novels. His Aunt Augusta, he hasn't seen her for 50 years, and met her at his mother's funeral, is a traveller. She likes to travel. And Henry is a retired bank manager, never much travelled, retired for 2 years, and is happy to accompany his aunt. We are here in chapter 8. It was my aunt who suggested that we should fly as far as Paris. I was a little surprised after what she had just said, for there was certainly in this case an alternative means of travel. I pointed out this inconsistency. There are reasons, Aunt Augusta said. Cogent reasons. I know the ropes at Heathrow. I was puzzled too at her insistence that we must go to the Kensington Air Terminal and take the airport bus. It's so easy for me, I said, to pick you up by car and drive you to Heathrow. You would find it much less tiring, Aunt Augusta. You would have to pay an exorbitant garage fee, she replied, and I found her sudden sense of economy unconvincing. I arranged next day for the dahlias to be watered by my next-door neighbour, a brusque man called Major Charge. He had seen Detective Sergeant Sparrow come to the door with a policeman, and he was bitten by curiosity. I told him it was about a motoring offence, and he became sympathetic immediately. A child murdered every week, he said, and all they can do is prosecute motorists. I don't like lies, and I felt in my conscience that I ought to defend Sergeant Sparrow, who had been as good as his word, and posted back the urn, registered and express. Sergeant Sparrow is not in homicide, I replied, and motorists kill more people in a year than murderers. Only a lot of jaywalkers, Major Charge said. Cannon fodder. However, he agreed to water the dahlias. I picked my aunt up in the bar of the Crown and Anchor, where she was having a stirrup cup, and we drove by taxi to the Kensington terminal. I noticed that she had brought 2 suitcases, one very large, although I asked her how long we were to stay in Istanbul. She had replied 24 hours. It seems a short stay after such a long journey. The point of the journey, my aunt replied, I enjoy the travelling, not the sitting still. Even Uncle Joe, I argued, had put up with each room in his house for a whole week. Joe was a sick man, she said, while I am in the best of health. Since we were travelling first class, which seemed again an unnecessary luxury between London and Paris, we had no overweight, although the larger of her suitcases was unusually heavy. While we were sitting in the bus, I suggested to my aunt that the garage fee for my car would probably have been cheaper than the difference between first and tourist class. The difference, she said, is nearly wiped out by the caviar and the smoked salmon, and surely between us we can probably put away half a bottle of vodka, not to speak of the champagne and cognac. In any case, I have more important reasons for travelling by bus. As we approached Heathrow, she put her mouth close to my ear. The luggage, she said, is in a trailer behind. I know. I have a green suitcase and a red suitcase. Here are the tickets. I took them, not understanding. When the bus stops, please get out quickly and see whether the trailer is still attached. If it is still there, let me know at once, and I'll give you further instructions. Something in my aunt's manner made me nervous. I said, Of course it will be there. I sincerely hope not, she said, otherwise we shall not leave today. I jumped out as soon as we arrived, and sure enough the trailer wasn't there. What do I do now? I asked her. Nothing at all. Everything is quite in order. You may give me back the tickets and relax." As we sat over 2 gins and tonics in the departure lounge, a loudspeaker announced, "Passengers on flight 378 to Nice will proceed to customs for customs inspection." We were alone at our table, and my aunt did not bother to lower her voice amid the din of passengers' glasses and loudspeakers. "That is what I wish to avoid," she said. "They have now taken to spot checks on passengers leaving the country. They whittle away our liberties one by one. When I was a girl, you could travel anywhere on the continent except Russia without a passport, and you took what you liked in the way of money. Until recently, they only asked what money you had, or at the very worst, they wanted to see your wallet. If there's one thing I hate in any human being, it is mistrust." "The way you speak," I said jokingly, "I suspect we are lucky that it is not your bags which are being searched." I could well imagine my aunt stuffing a dozen £5 notes into the toe of her bedroom slippers. Having been a bank manager, I'm perhaps over-scrupulous, though I must confess that I had an extra £5 note folded up in my ticket pocket, but that was something I might genuinely have overlooked. "Luck doesn't enter into my calculations," my aunt said. "Only a fool would trust to luck, and there's probably a fool now on the Nice flight who is regretting his folly. Whenever new restrictions are made, I make a careful study of the arrangements for carrying them out." She gave a little sigh. "In the case of Heathrow, I owe a great deal to Wordsworth. For a time he acted as a loader there. He left when there was some trouble about a gold consignment. Nothing was ever proved against him, but the whole affair had been too impromptu and disgusted him. He told me the story. A very large ingot was abstracted by a loader, and the loss was discovered too soon, before the men went off duty. They knew as a result that they would be searched by the police on leaving, all taxis too, and they had no idea what to do with the thing until Wordsworth suggested rolling it in tar and using it as doorstep in the customs shed. So there it stayed for months. Every time they brought crates along to the shed, they could see their ingot propping open the door. Wordsworth said he got so maddened by the sight of it that he threw up the job. That was when he became a doorman at the Granada Palace. What happened to the ingot? I suppose the authorities lost interest when the diamond robbery started. Diamonds are money for jam, Henry. You see, they have special sealed sacks for valuable freight, and these stacks are put into ordinary sacks, the idea being that the loaders can't spot them. The official mind is remarkably innocent. By the time you've been loading sacks a week or two, you can feel which sack contains another inside it. Then all you got to do is to slit both coverings open and take potluck. Like a children's bran tub at Christmas, nobody is going to discover the slit until the plane arrives at the other end. Wordsworth knew a man who struck lucky the first time and pulled out a box with 50 gemstones. Surely somebody's watching. Only the other loaders, and they take a share. Of course, occasionally a man has bad luck. Once a friend of Wordsworth fished out a fat packet of notes, but they proved to be Pakistani, worth about £1,000 if you happen to live in Karachi. But who was going to change them for him here? The poor fellow used to haunt the tarmac whenever a plane was taking off to Karachi, but he never found a safe customer. Wordsworth said he got quite embittered. I had no idea such things went on at Heathrow. My dear Henry, Aunt Augusta said, if you had been a young man, I would have advised you to become a loader. A loader's life is one of adventure, with far more chance of a fortune than you ever have in a branch bank. I can imagine nothing better for a young man with ambition, except perhaps illicit diamond digging. That is best practiced in Sierra Leone, where Wordsworth comes from. The security guards are less sophisticated and less ruthless than in South Africa. Sometimes you shock me, Aunt Augusta, I said, but the statement had already almost ceased to be true. I have never had anything stolen from my suitcase, and I don't even lock it. That is probably your safeguard. No one is going to bother about an unlocked suitcase. Wordsworth knew a loader who had keys to every kind of suitcase. There are not many varieties, though he was baffled once by a Russian one. The loudspeaker announced our flight, and we were told to proceed at once to gate 14 for immediate embarkation. For someone who doesn't like airports, I said, you seem to know a great deal about Heathrow. I've always been interested in human nature, Aunt Augusta said, especially the more imaginative sides of it. She ordered another 2 gins and tonics immediately we arrived on the plane. There goes 10 shillings towards the first-class fare, she said. A friend of mine calculated once that on a long flight to Tahiti, it took in those days more than 64 hours. He recuperated nearly £20, but of course he was a hard drinker. Again I had the impression that I was turning the pages in an American magazine in search of contribution which I had temporarily lost. I still don't understand, I said, about the luggage trailer and the suitcase. Why were you so anxious that the trailer should disappear? I have an impression, my aunt said, that you are really a little shocked by trivial illegalities. When you reach my age, you will be more tolerant. Years ago, Paris was regarded as the vice center of the world, as Buenos Aires was before that. But Madame de Gaulle altered things there. Rome, Milan, Venice and Naples survived a decade longer. But then the only 2 cities left were Macau and Havana. Macau has been cleaned up by the Chinese Chamber of Commerce and Havana by Fidel Castro. For the moment, Heathrow is the Havana of the West. It won't last very long, and of course, but one must admit that at the present time, London Airport has a glamour which certainly puts Britain first. Have you got a little vodka for the caviar? She asked the hostess, who brought our trays. I prefer it to champagne. But Aunt Augusta, you have still not told me about the trailer. It's very simple, my aunt said. If the luggage is to be loaded direct onto the aircraft, the trailer is detached outside the Queen Elizabeth building. There are always traffic hold-ups at this point, and nothing is noticed by the passengers. If, when the bus arrives at the BEA or Air France entrance, you find the trailer is still attached, this means that the luggage is going to be sent to the customs. Personally, I have a rooted objections to unknown hands, which have fiddled about in all kinds of strange luggage, some not over clean, fiddling about in mine. What do you do then? I reclaim my bags, saying that after all I don't require them on the voyage and wish to leave them in the cloakroom. Or I cancel my flight and try again another day. She finished her smoked salmon and went on to the caviar. There's no such convenient system as that at Dover. I would prefer to go by boat. Aunt Augusta, I said, what are you carrying in your suitcases? Only one is a little dangerous, she said, the red. I always use the red for that purpose. Red for danger, she added with a smile. But what have you got in the red one? A trifle, Aunt Augusta said, something to help us in our travels. I don't really endure any longer these absurd travel allowances anyway. Allowances for grown people. When I was a child, I received £1 a week pocket money. If you consider the value of the pound today, that is rather more than what we are allowed to travel with annually. You haven't eaten your portion of foie gras. It doesn't agree with me, I said. Then I will take it. Stuart, another glass of champagne and another vodka. We are just descending, ma'am. The more reason for you to hurry, young man. She fastened her seatbelt. I'm glad that Wordsworth left Heathrow before I came to know him. He was in danger of being corrupted. Oh, I don't mean thieving. A little honest thieving hurts no one, especially when it is a question of gold. Gold needs free circulation. The Spanish Empire would have decayed far more quickly if Sir Francis Drake had not kept the proportion of the Spanish gold in circulation. But there are other things. I have mentioned Havana, and you mustn't think me straight-laced. I'm all for a little professional sex. You have probably read about the activities of Superman, and I am sure that the sight of him cured many a frigidity. Thank you, Stuart. She drained her vodka. We have not done badly. I would say we have almost covered the difference between first class and tourists. If you take into account a little overweight with my red suitcase. There was a brothel in Havana where the Emperor's crown was admirably performed by 3 nice girls. The establishments saved many a marriage from boredom. And then there was the Shanghai Theatre and the Chinese Quarter of Havana with 3 blue films which were shown in the intervals of a nude review for all the price of $1 with a pornographic bookshop in the foyer thrown in. I was there once with a Mr. Fernandez, who had a cattle farm in Paraguay. I met him in Rome after Mr. Visconti had temporarily disappeared, and he invited me to Cuba for a month's holiday. The place was ruined, though, long before the revolution. I am told that to compete with television they put in a large screen. The films, of course, had all been shot on 16mm, and when they were enlarged practically to cinema size, it really needed an act of faith to distinguish any feature of the human body. The plane banked steeply over Le Bourget. It's all very harmless, my aunt said, and gave employment to a great many people. But the things which go on around Heathrow. The steward brought another vodka, and my aunt tossed it down. She had a strong head. I had noticed that already. But her mind, under the influence of alcohol, ranged to and fro. We were talking of Heathrow, I reminded her, for my curiosity had been aroused. In my aunt's company, I found myself oddly ignorant about my own country. There are a number of big firms around Heathrow, my aunt said. Electronics, engineering, film manufacturers. Glaxo, as one would expect, is quite untouched by the Heathrow influence. After office hours, some of the technicians give private parties. Air crews are welcome, so long as stewardesses are included in the party, even loaders. Wordsworth was always invited, but only on condition he brought a girl and was willing to exchange her at the party for another. Pornographic films are shown first as an encouragement. Wordsworth was genuinely attached to his girl, but he had to surrender her in exchange for a technician's wife who was a homely woman of 50 called Ada. It seemed to me that the old professional brothel system was far healthier than those exaggerated amateur distractions. But then, an amateur always goes too far. An amateur is never in proper control of his art. There was a discipline in the old-time brothels. The madame, in many ways, played a role similar to that of the headmistress of Rodin. A brothel, after all, is a kind of school, and not least a school of manners. I have known several madams of real distinction who would have just been at home in Rodin and have lent distinction to any school. How on earth did you get to know them? I asked. But the plane was bumping on the Le Bourget field, and my aunt began to fuss about her luggage. I think it better, she said, if we pass through customs and immigration separately. My red case is rather a heavy one, and I would be glad if you could take it with you. Employ a porter. It is always easier to obtain a taxi with a porter's help. And show in your manners that the tip will be a good one before you arrive at the customs. There is often an understanding between porter and a douanier. I will meet you outside. Here is the ticket for the red case. Right, so that was the end of chapter 8, and I read chapter 9 soon.